Jacobson and Chan describe the relationship between 1st and 2nd Chronicles and parallel material from other biblical books, including Samuel and Kings, as complicated. From a literary perspective, these two accounts cover similar ground, but they have different emphases and offer a different perspective. An oversimplification of the differences regarding the connection between God and God's people, Israel, could be summed up in the terms relationship, Deuteronomistic history, versus law, Chronicles. The overall plot of the Deuteronomistic history has to do with the question, can Israel serve the Lord? The Deuteronomistic history is not history in the modern sense of the term, because the aim of the author of Samuel was not simply to describe the past as accurately and objectively as possible, but rather to draw on the past in order to communicate theological and ethical truths about God, about God's relationship with Israel, and about how to follow God. Also, the authors of Kings were attempting to draw on the stories of the past in order to explain why Israel and Judah fell, to recognize God's purpose with Israel and Judah, and to understand God's future for the people. It was not in the purpose of the authors to describe history with accurate chronologies and so forth. Chronicles' hope is focused on the restoration of the temple and its concern to bring history into conformity with Torah. Chronicles provides many genealogies, not simply or even primarily about record keeping, but about theology. Chronicles has a tendency to bring the actions of Israel's historical figures into conformity with Mosaic law, which reserves cultic service for the Levites. For example, significant attention is given to Judah's ancestry and Levi. The way the account of Saul is handled shows us that the books of Chronicles are just as interesting for what they leave out as for what they include. It seems that Chronicles is committed to present David in a far more favorable light than he is in Samuel, omitting many of the messy details of his life. The author of Chronicles had an agenda to justify and glorify Davidic rule in Jerusalem. Chronicles also depicts Solomon, his reign, and his piety in a good light, and describes the temple's construction so that it conforms more closely to the tabernacle of Moses in the Pentateuch. Stephen L. Mackenzie points out that Chronicles lacks a running account of the divided kingdom of Israel, which its author considered theologically illegitimate. It is clear that Chronicles has something significant to say about the God of Israel, the temple, and the future of the exiles. We read in the Bible of Sennacherib's campaign against Judah under Hezekiah's rule in 701 BCE in 2 Kings 18-19, the A, B1, and B2 accounts, a parallel account in Isaiah 36-37, the reshaping of these accounts in 2 Chronicles 32, the C account, and a prophecy in Micah 3. Extra-biblical sources that mention this event include primarily the Annals of King Sennacherib, notably inscribed on the Taylor Prism, the Oriental Institute Prism, and the Jerusalem Prism, but also in the deuterocanonical accounts in Tobit 1 and Sirach 48, and in Herodotus's histories. The key points of agreement include the fact that Assyria's invasion of Judah and siege of Jerusalem did take place. Taxes were levied, exactly the same amount of gold taken as tribute, 30 talents, along with details about all the silver being given and the gold being stripped from the temple doors. The A account is mostly consistent with Sennacherib's inscription. The texts seem to all agree that Judah resumed its vassal status to Assyria after 701. The key points of disagreement go beyond merely variations in other numerical data. The Assyrian account disagrees with the B sources in significant ways, significantly claiming success in this particular siege. This means that both sides of this military confrontation claim victory, highly problematic. The Assyrian account also includes a number of battles against the Babylonians for which the Assyrians simply falsely claimed victory. This casts doubt on the veracity of the account of this particular campaign. From a historian's point of view, we can evaluate the different sources of evidence by understanding that, as Hayes tells us, campaign accounts were shaped according to the literary and ideological preferences of the authors. It's important to take into account proximity to the events narrated because it is usually assumed that accounts closer to the events are less changed by oral transmission or later points of view. In this particular campaign, we know that the Annals version was written within less than a year of the siege of Jerusalem, closer to the events in question. The oldest surviving copy of the biblical account is from the Dead Sea Scrolls more than 500 years after the events, although we know that some parts of the text are much older. The historian's ideology certainly shapes any historical account. Even knowing that, it is important to ask this question: to what extent was this version based on accurate memory or records? When there are discrepancies, such as both sides claiming victory in various accounts, it is possible that the accounts describe separate invasions. However, one major problem for historians is that Assyrian annals after 689 BCE have not been discovered. Hayes concludes, though, that historically inclined biblical scholars are opting for the one campaign solution due to a variety of factors. He recommends that we seek to reconcile the narrative oddities without making recourse to events for which there is no clear evidence. Historical surprises rarely arise from single factors. The biblical text offers reasons for Jerusalem's survival: Egyptian military aid, sickness among the Assyrian troops, and/or divine intervention. There may have been intermarriage between Judean and Assyrian rulers. Judeans served Sennacherib as bodyguards, and Sennacherib gave exceptional praise to Hezekiah, even though he was a rebellious foreign king. It is possible that Assyria did not consider Judah prosperous enough to justify expending the energy to conquer it completely and turn it into a province. From all of this, we can conclude that it is exceedingly difficult to determine historical accuracy conclusively. Hayes assures us that the reconstruction of events remains subject to critical judgment. My best guess as to what really happened, based on the evidence available to me today, is that Assyria invaded Judah and besieged Jerusalem. Hezekiah prayed, and God intervened to rescue his people by allowing Judah to prevail over Assyria. This intervention would have been understood better by the Judeans, to whom God had already revealed himself, than to the Assyrians, who had no understanding of Yahweh. This, along with the human propensity to want to save face, would explain to me why the various accounts were written as they were. I would also add that the Judeans' commitment to Yahweh included a commitment to truth-telling, per the Ten Commandment admonition to not bear false witness, which lends much more credibility to the biblical accounts than to the Assyrian account. It does not seem that truth was valued to the same degree, especially in light of the aforementioned falsely claimed victories. This example shows us that when it comes to historical reconstruction, even when we have substantial evidence to work with, that it's complicated. It's important to keep all of the various factors in view at all times and to hold conclusions lightly with humility, understanding that new evidence may be discovered, for example, in archaeological discoveries, that may send us back to the drawing board to consider new possibilities that we didn't know existed beforehand.